feelings were ours, we could say, may my feelings always be pleasant, never painful. May my perceptions always be agreeable, never disagreeable. May my volitions always be good and wholesome, never defiled and unwholesome. May my consciousness always be right, be bright and radiant, filled with knowledge and awareness. May it never be dull, defiled, sad, so on. Since we want only happiness and never suffering, if the five aggregates was self, they would always produce happiness for us and never lead to suffering. But again and again, they lead to suffering. We don't have control over them. Therefore, the five aggregates are not self. And that deals with the first position. The aggregates cannot be identified as a self because the self must be lasting, simple, unconditioned, and subject to mastery, whereas the five aggregates are impermanent, compounded, conditioned, and not subject to mastery. Now we take the second position. This position holds that there is a self distinct from the aggregates, contained within them or behind them. But if there does exist a self distinct from the aggregates, we should be able to find it, to point to it, to say, this is myself. But when we try to identify the self, to give the idea some content, whatever we come upon, whatever we grasp hold of, turns out to be one or another of the five aggregates, or some combination of them. Even the mind which is doing the searching, that is just a group of aggregates. A mind consciousness associated with feelings, perceptions, and volitions. We can't find any self separate and distinct from the aggregates. This is like looking for a pit inside an onion. We open the onion and start looking for the pit. All we find is roll after roll of onion, without any core or pit on the inside. So looking for the self within the compound of mind and body, all we find are aggregates enclosing aggregates enclosing aggregates. We never hit upon any solid, substantial self. The notion of self turns out to be a void idea, an idea without content. But some people try to interpret Nibbana as a self. They take Nirvana to be a supreme universal self. But this idea is not acceptable according to the early form of the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha says, Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. All dhammas, all actualities are not self. He says all formations are impermanent and all formations are unsatisfactory. But all dharmas are not self. All formations covers only conditioned things, sankharas. Nibbana, the unconditioned, is not a sankhara. Therefore, it's not impermanent and not suffering. On the contrary, it's lasting and stable and the supreme happiness. But Nibbana is a Dhamma, and because it's a Dhamma, in actuality, it can't be identified as a universal or supreme self. To illustrate the selfless nature of the five aggregates, the Buddha gives certain similes. He says that the body is like a lump of foam. A lump of foam seems solid, but when we crush it, it turns out to be just hollow and empty. Feeling is like bubbles on water. They just arise and break up and show themselves to be empty. Perception is like a mirage. Mirage appears, but when we examine the object, we don't find anything substantial. Formations, the mental formations, are like the trunk of a banana tree. Just rolls of tissue within rolls and rolls of tissue. without any heartwood inside. And consciousness is like a magical illusion. It appears but has no substance. So no matter how much we examine them, they just reveal themselves to be empty. Shallow forms without any core or any substance. Fleeting processes. They delude us into grasping an attachment. In the end, they prove disappointing. Now, one problem that's sometimes raised is how the teaching of non-self fits together with the teaching of rebirth. If no self can be found within the body-mind complex, how can rebirth take place? We'll deal with this question more fully in the later talk, the one on karma and rebirth. Here we'll just give a brief answer. The positing of a self isn't needed to guarantee rebirth. In Buddhism, rebirth is understood as occurring through causal continuity. The body-mind process, even in this life, maintains its unity entirely through causal succession, without any lasting self. Each moment of experience is connected with its predecessors and with its successors through a transmission of influence, through a causal succession. So each moment of consciousness receives all the stored up experience that occurred previously in the continuum, the whole storage of memories, habits, tendencies, and karma built up in the past. Then each moment in turn transmits this storage to its successors, along with its own unique contribution. And thus the whole stream of experience has a unity and coherence. In one life we can identify ourselves as the same person from birth to death. But this can be done not because there's a permanent ego entity, but because there is a causal continuity, a transmission of experience going on at every moment. In the same way, at death, the body falls away and memory is blotted out. But the mental process, the stream of consciousness, continues on with the support of a new physical body. Character, experience, the tendencies, karma, these pass on through the flow of mind from one life to another. And now we come to the last topic, a very important topic. And this is the place of the teaching on the